Okay. Usually if I give the camera my face starting out, be like, hey, focus on my beautiful eyes. This is without all the lights turned on. If I turn that guy on, this guy on, and then this is what it looks like when I have all of the lights on. Just for fun, because I had my hats out yesterday. I need to wear this hat. Am I recording? Wait. Okay, now I'm recording. If I wanted to play a song, go like... Sounds so bad. This guitar is so out of tune. This guitar is a super cheap guitar. Sounds so bad. Just because I'm being stupid right now. See, this one actually holds this tune. That is one of the only songs that I ever really kind of actually learned on the guitar before. I think it's a pretty gorgeous sounding song, even though it fits like the extremely cliche 4 chords that are in like every Christian song ever written. Still think it's really beautiful, and it's partly why I learned it. I also partly learned it because it's such a simple song. Can I sing it all? No, I can't. I sound horrible when I try to sing. But might as well embarrass myself, right? Bless the Lord, oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. How'd that sound? Was it pretty bad? It's okay though. On a scale from professional singer to not professional singer, I'm not even on the scale. I'm always so timid when I'm trying to sing, but since Benji's not here, nobody's here, I'm in the house all by myself, I don't feel like anybody will hear me. It gives me extra boldness to speak loud and to try to sing loud. So, if I try to sing with a lot of confidence, I wonder what it sounds like. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, soul. Why I'm even doing this right now, I don't entirely know. But maybe I'll make this the intro to my video. Got a message. Thought you wanted to go at 3? Is that anything about going anywhere at 3? I guess maybe we agreed to that yesterday. Hello. Today is Sunday, and I am making this video before I hopefully make another video. But last night, I was kind of thinking, and I know that's really surprising because it's actually pretty rare that you'll ever find me thinking about the world. I tend to spend most of my time either sitting around doing nothing or mindlessly watching stuff. I never sit around just thinking, like, it's so unlike me. But as it happens, I was sitting around just thinking last night, and it crossed my mind that I've been complaining a lot within the last year about feeling invalidated and feeling like I'm in conflict with my Christian friends. And my thought was that, and I've felt this for a while, but I don't feel like I've allowed myself to admit it to myself. But what I think is that most of that is actually in my head. And I think a lot of it is derived from either this perceived idea that I had before leaving Christianity that people who are Christian are antagonistic toward people who aren't Christian, and so I think I automatically assume people are being antagonistic even when they're not. And then 2, I feel like I'm frustrated because for strictly emotional reasons, I just want my friends to agree with me about the whole God thing. It's just really frustrating to me because I'm so convinced that Christianity isn't true, and so I don't want people to disagree with me about it. And I think because I feel so strongly about that, it makes it really frustrating to me when people have this attitude of like, you believe that and I believe this and that's fine and we don't have to fight about it, but I'm not necessarily going to change my mind. That's frustrating to me because I want them to change their mind. But that's me kind of causing the problem. That's not them causing the problem. And I think that while I definitely encounter a number of Christians, mostly of whom don't actually know me very well, who can be a little bit combative with me and argumentative, I have to say that I don't think I've been giving enough credit to my really close friends for how absolutely incredible they've been, how patient they've been, and how loving they've been toward me within the last year and a half of me not being a Christian. Whether it's like Hostine or Anna or Benji, I feel like while they do get a little bit defensive if I try to start like questioning whether Christianity is true or not, or they get like a little bit tense, I honestly can't say there's ever been a moment when things got tense without me kind of making them tense by getting into philosophical discussions about faith. And while I could maybe say that it's a little frustrating in general that Christians tend to be a little bit tense about talking about faith and questioning it, I think it's also true that anybody who believes anything is generally going to be somewhat defensive if you start calling what they believe into question, unless you go way out of your way to make them feel really safe. Like something that I haven't been wanting to accept, that I really need to accept, because this is my like idealistic mind versus my like being realistic mind, where I need to realize that it's completely okay that there are people who accept Christianity and think that it's true, and specifically that those people are my really close friends. I just really want them to not think that it's true. And I want them to think that it's not true because it would be a little bit less tense if I was around them, and I would probably have a little bit more support from them with some of my ideas about creating a more peaceful world. But at the end of the day, as much as I hate to say this, and this is the part that I don't want to admit to myself, but I feel like within my own moral thinking, it's not right for me, and not even within a moral sense, or within like my own morals or ethics. I think that just from like a practical level, it's not, or not practical. I guess it would be kind of moral then. But just like, as like a person to person, being a decent, kind person, I don't feel like it's very, man, I'm having a hard time describing this. It's not fun or pleasant to hang around somebody who is trying to change your mind. Like, literally, this is what I get frustrated with Christians for when they try to change my mind. So, I could understand why a lot of my Christian friends might get kind of frustrated and defensive if they feel like I'm constantly trying to question what they believe about the world, which I feel like I do. And I don't do it because I have necessarily like an agenda, strictly speaking, but like subconsciously I kind of have an agenda, and that I really want them to agree with me because I don't like all the, I've gone full circle. So it's like I have a bunch of emotional reasons for wanting them to change their minds, and I feel like subconsciously that causes me to want to constantly point out everything that I see as like logical fallacies or incongruencies in the way that they think. But if I just do that all the time, then they don't feel safe because I'm not giving them the space to believe what they believe in the way that they've been giving me space to believe what I believe. So, yeah. And there's the other part of me where it's like, I feel very strongly that whether God, or more specifically whether Christianity is or isn't true, I don't really feel like that's an opinion. But again, I feel like that's part of my idealistic mind kind of being really obsessive about the truth. And I kind of laugh at myself because on one side, I feel more confident than I've ever felt about almost anything I believe, that my realization, as I like to call it, that Christianity isn't true, is not something I'm ever going to change my mind about. I'm extremely doubtful that that would ever change. Because so much about how the world works makes too much sense otherwise. It's like there are a lot of other things that could be true that I might come to change my mind toward, but going backwards and saying that Christianity is actually true and that somehow I am morally responsible for before God and somehow guilty and need forgiveness, or that God really wanted to have a relationship with me. Like, to me, those things have been so utterly disproven by my personal experience with myself and with other people that undoing those to me would just be like unfathomable practically. But there are many times in the past when when I was a Christian, when I just felt so strongly that I knew that I was right. And that's actually what led me away from Christianity. So, what led me away was the realization that I hold really strong beliefs about things sometimes and then end up changing my mind. So I shouldn't be so, confident that what I believe is true. So, logically, that should kind of have to apply even now that I'm convinced that Christianity definitely isn't true. And I guess I could even put some kind of hedging. But I feel like it's a lot easier and a lot more logically sound to be confident about that which you don't know than to have confidence and back up with logically sound arguments a claim that you do know something. And I think that's where a lot of my confidence comes from, where outside of, or on top of my confidence that it makes I can't logically justify that I have the power to not do things that are morally wrong. If for, among other reasons, I can't know, and strictly speaking, what is and isn't morally wrong, because it's ambiguous, even though there are some outliers where it's like, there are a few things that are pretty universal among humans that we hold really strongly that are, you're not going to find very many human beings who think that murder isn't immoral. But then there are a lot of other things where it's like, what kind of language is or isn't immoral? Or especially when it comes to pleasure, there's a very fine line around morality. Is, drinking alcohol to the point of being extremely drunk immoral? It's very ambiguous, because you could try to say that being drunk could potentially be a lack of self-control, which you might consider immoral, or anyway, it's ambiguous. So I'm going on all these tangents, and that's fine, because this is just another verbal processing video. I'm not even looking at the camera for half of this. And I probably sound way too energized right now. I'm just going and going and going. And I'm kind of even losing my train of thought, but I think I still have it. Because I was basically saying that it's a lot easier to know that you don't know something than it is to know that you do know something. And I think morality is something that is ambiguously knowable. So there's some things that we know more confidently, but then a lot of things that are very ambiguous. So most Christians don't agree about what is and isn't moral. They just agree that morality does exist, which is something that, I'm not going to get into all of that necessarily right now. But a step further than that, I was just going to say that I feel very strongly that I don't know whether God is real or not. And as something that I feel like is fundamentally contradictory to what should be true if Christianity were real. Because I think that if Christianity really was true, the argument would be whether to trust God or not, as opposed to does God exist or not. If we can have reasonable reason, you don't have to prove that God doesn't real, but if you even have if you can reasonably say, it's there are some things where you could reasonably think that it might be true, and also at the same time reasonably believe something isn't true. And that's different than something that is almost certainly true that is completely unreasonable to say isn't true. It's probably a way overused example, but the flat Earth versus round spherical-ish Earth floating in outer space orbiting the sun in a heliocentric theory. It'd be pretty ridiculous to say that there's a reasonable argument that the Earth isn't round and that it's not orbiting the sun. There is very, very little reason to think that that isn't true. But then there are other things like, what would be a good example? So maybe a good example, like human behavior stuff is largely going to fall into, you can generally make a pretty good case for a pretty wide variety of behaviors, which could be pretty dramatically different from each other. So like, I could make a pretty reasonable argument that when Benji gets back from hanging out with his family, that he would be energized as opposed to tired. Because he brought his Switch with him, so he's likely going to be like relaxing and playing games as opposed to working, which will probably get his mind off of work. He's hanging out with family who he really loves. He gets to see his niece Winter, I think. So I think it'll be a pretty restful time for him. So I could pretty reasonably hold the belief that Benji would come back rested. At the same time, it could also be that like Benji tends to be pretty introverted, and spending concentrated amounts of time with people can be tiring for him. And given that he always has a lot going on at work, it might be that he fails to really disconnect from work and he's thinking about it the whole weekend, and therefore it kind of stresses him out and keeps it from being too restful. And so now I could also fairly reasonably conclude that he might come back tired. And either one of those could reasonably be true. And I don't have a strong reason to believe that one or the other absolutely has to be true. It's just one or the other might be true. And I think that when it comes to my belief in God, I lean a little bit more on the side that probably not true. But there are a lot of arguments which do, like the teleological argument, some of the more like massive ones that I feel like would fall into the category of like, is there good reason to think that some kind of supernatural other existence beyond what we can see and feel being out there and existing? Like, I think that makes a lot of sense to some degree. Like, I think it's reasonable to think that it's possible. Just as much as you could reasonably conclude that it's just our human brain and creative mind that wants to invent such things, and that it's really just our imagination as opposed to something that's logically justifiable. But either one, I personally feel like is really kind of like reasonably possibly true. But when you have two things that are both reasonably possibly true, a human being should come to the conclusion that, I don't know. Like, I don't know how Benji's gonna come back. It'd be pretty ridiculous for me to make any kind of serious consequential decision or behavior off of assuming that Benji is going to come back either tired or rested. Because I don't have a really strong way of determining whether one or the other was true. Yeah, it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to like live my whole life assuming that Benji's gonna come back tired just because it's reasonable for me to assume that he could come back tired, because he could just as reasonably also come back not tired and well rested. So that's why I feel so strongly about Christianity not being true, because I think that while a lot of the arguments made for Christianity aren't entirely outrageous, or at least arguments for the existence of a supernatural, or for there being something more than just the evolutionary natural physical process going on inside of our complex human minds and consciousness, to say that you know certainly that it comes from Christianity, which is even in and of itself a somewhat ambiguous concept, since most Christians don't agree with very much, except for potentially one of the most fundamental underlying things within Christianity, especially since Christianity means followers of Christ, is that Jesus is the Son of God, and that he died so that we wouldn't have to take the punishment for our sin, which we are morally responsible for having committed. And I feel like there are even Christians who don't entirely agree with that way of putting it, but regardless of how you put it, making the claim that Jesus is the Son of God and that his dying on the cross somehow reconciled us to God, even that claim, like among all the other claims, that one I don't feel like there's enough consensus among human beings for having some kind of like intuition that we have a responsibility before God, that claim can be reasonably justified from anybody to say that they know that it's true. Like, again, there are tons of reasons why you could reasonably say it's possibly true, but I don't think there's a way to reasonably say that it has to be true. Like, there are a ton of alternatives for what could also possibly be true. So I think that, again, human beings should be like, I don't know, as opposed to, oh yeah, I definitely know that this, out of all the potential justifiable, somewhat logical conclusions, that this one that somebody told me about has to be the right one. Anyway, I'm just kind of going on a long rant at this point. The whole point of this video really was just to say that I'm really excited right now, if you can't tell, because in having come to peace with the fact that I've been kind of inflating the conflict that exists, or the disconnect that exists between me and my friends, by recognizing that and kind of moving around that, I actually feel way better. Because I hate conflict, and it's ironic to me that I hate conflict, and I was creating a conflict, but then I was trying to figure out how to make the conflict go away. But the incredible thing is that since I was the source of the conflict, I can also, much easier than if other people were the source of conflict, since I'm the source of the conflict, it's so easy for me to make the conflict go away by simply changing my attitude and having a more accurate understanding of how my friends actually think and feel. So that makes me excited, because from now on, I'm going to, I want to go have some conversations with some of my friends, and I want to just be a little bit more straightforward with them and be like, hey, how do you feel about how we've been relating to each other since I left Christianity? And just be really blunt, really honest, and be like, do you feel like I tried to change your mind about these things? Is that frustrating to you? How could I stop doing that? And I mostly know how I could stop doing that, probably. But it'd be interesting just to see how they've perceived it and how they feel about it. And just be like, hey, is it something that you ever want to talk about? Is it something you don't want to talk about? And if you don't, then great, I won't bring it up. And then be able to tell them that there are some things that they do once in a while which do make me feel a little bit put down. But I don't think that they necessarily understand what those are or do them intentionally. And I think if I just brought them up, we could have a pretty reasonable conversation. And I think once they saw it, they would, without me even having to ask, probably stop. Because they're absolutely incredible, empathetic people, and they understand how to listen well. So, yeah. So I'm really excited to have some just kind of more straightforward conversations with my friends to be like, hey, how do you feel about me? Because I think I'm projecting all these emotions onto you that probably aren't true about how you feel about me. And then I think that will make me feel a lot more safe with them. And then maybe some of them will actually be more open to having conversations about these things in a setting where I'm not trying to change their mind, but we're just kind of both being open and honest and curious about what we think and why we believe what we do. So, yeah, all of this is very exciting for me. And I think this is also huge for me because I specifically want to start making YouTube videos around me being an atheist or me leaving Christianity, but specifically in the vein of helping people get along with each other. I don't want it to be combative. And in fact, I had the idea this morning of starting or naming my YouTube channel Peaceful Atheist. I know there's a growing movement of people who kind of want to make atheists, destigmatize the word atheist. And I kind of feel that. I think that, well, on one side, it has kind of a divisive undertone to it. At the same time, I think there are a lot of people who are technically atheist, but they don't want to claim the word because it has such negative undertones and connotations. And I think that taking the approach of being a peaceful atheist, I'm coming out with a lot of content that is extremely peace-oriented and oriented toward having respectful conversations between Christians and atheists, that it might create a more positive feeling around the concept of atheist. And I can be a peaceful, positive light around the word atheist. I think those are mostly all the things that I wanted to say. Maybe the last thing is that today, in the next few hours, I want to just make a video. And I want to see if I can start making short, quick videos that are pretty high quality, that are just like quick and to the point with really brief, short questions, and see if I can come out with like a few every week and just like immediately come home from work, sit down with one idea, quickly come up with an outline, and then just follow through and get it done. I'm gonna be kind of frustrated if the camera didn't record all of this. However it goes, I'm done with my rant. Even if half this video ends up getting recorded here on my laptop computer, that's fine, because these videos and these vlogs are more about me verbal processing, and like the video I made yesterday, even though the quality was horribly cringy, just like, the transitions were so bad, and I feel like I still put way too much of the like me crying in there. But it's fine because like they're not supposed to be good, and the verbal processing helps me. So that's great. That's all I have to say right now. I want to get this video. It's funny when I do this, it like picks up tons of sound in the mic. I want to get to work on a video and see if I can get one out by the end of the day that's of decent quality. And the topic of the video is going to specifically be around and that's the direction I want to go with all of my videos on my channel. I want it to completely be about like so yeah. So I'm gonna end this video now and start making that one. Goodbye for now. I'll catch you later. Wow. I think the battery died on the camera. Which is funny, because that means who knows how long it hasn't been recording. It could have been like most of the video. But that's okay, that's why I have my computer recording the rest on these like long verbal processing things. Man, the number of times I've recorded stuff and didn't record it because my stupid camera or mic wasn't recording, goodness. But it's okay, life goes on. None of these videos are really what matter that much. And that's also why I want to make shorter videos, so I don't run the risk of having to re-record stuff. Anyway, that's all. Goodbye.